Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Disabled Warrior and Proud. Today we have Sarah Phillimore from St. John Chambers, where she is a barrister. Sarah was born in 1984 and specializes in public law, namely children act 1999 proceedings. In 2014, Sarah set up a child protection resource website which provides information about the child protection system. Sarah has a proximal record for moral efficiency, which led to a left leg being amputated in 1982, and she uses a prosthetic limb. Hi Sarah, it's great
Hello,
to have you.
thanks for having me.
No problem, it's really is good to have you. Thank you for coming on. Um, which campaign is about being a disabled warrior? So my first question to you is what does being disabled mean to you?
It's it's a really difficult question, isn't it? Because disability covers such a huge range of challenges, and I mean, I have no idea what it would be like to be blind or deaf. I mean, all I know is my own challenges, and I suppose it does it. What it means fundamentally is feeling quite isolated. I think because I haven't seen in all the 30 years I've been practicing, I haven't seen anybody like me. And that's really sad because in the last 30 years, so much has happened to provide greater visibility and protection for disabled people. So I thought I would see more people coming up through the ranks, but I haven't. So it's a mix of emotions, really. I'm quite proud of myself that I've got this far, but I'm also sad that I still seem to be an exception.
It is a shame because I think we all want more disabled people in law, both at the bar and the other professions. What do you think there aren't any people like you, even now, at the bar?
Well, the bar is a fantastically tough profession anyway, even if you're at the top of your mental and physical game. So I think there are a lot more obstacles. I mean, the travel, for example, fortunately, now a lot of it is electronic, the bundles, because I think I'd be struggling now I'm older to just physically manage the demands of going to court on a circuit. And I can see why it may have put more people off me. Maybe, who knows, maybe the greater advances in technology, electronic bundles and so on are going to start filtering through, because I bet there's a lot of disabilities where things are much easier now because we can access technology. I mean, that's what I'm hoping anyway, because if things are still like this in 10 years' time, then I think we've got to accept that all the various programs, initiatives haven't worked, and disabled people are just not represented in this profession in the ways that they should be to reflect the general population.
Absolutely. I think I may be wrong, but I think only 3% of barristers declare themselves as disabled compared to 11% of population. So it's a huge gap in those figures. You spoke about having some pride about making it feel about with your impairment. How do you feel about disability pride in general?
How do I feel about what? Sorry.
Disability pride.
Um, Again, mixed emotions, because it's not like saying black is beautiful. It, disability is often a horrible, debilitating, lonely, painful thing, and it's it's difficult, isn't it, to say, to march under a banner going disabled and proud, because I wouldn't want to not honor those struggles and that pain that a lot of people feel. But obviously, it's really important that we are able to identify who we are and be proud of that. And it does upset me sometimes. I see a lot of visibility for other groups who are able to march under the banner of saying they're proud. And I don't see that filtering through to the disabled community. And I wonder whether that's another factor, possibly in our lack of visibility, that we can't quite so easily march under that banner of being proud, because it brings mixed emotions to me. I'm proud of what I've achieved, but would I have chosen to be born disabled? No. Would I swap it in a heartbeat? Yes. So can I really say I'm proud of my identity? It's a bit of a philosophical question, that one, isn't it? I think I'll go with mixed emotions on that one.
I think most people have a mixed feeling about disability. And I think for me, you mentioned about all the barriers that we face and the difficulties we face. I think that's what I'm most proud of about the disabled community. We all have these different conditions or impairments or disabilities that make life different and more challenging in a way. And on top of that, we deal with attitudes and lack of access and inaccessible working practices on top of that.
Yeah.
And we sell monies to get out there and contribute in whatever way we do that. I think that's where my plan comes from. I very, very actually think about having cerebral palsy because I can't walk. And my movement is severely limited. If society was built in an accessible way, I wouldn't really have much difficulty getting around. Well,
Mm.
that's only me and my condition. Well, it is disability Prime Month, and it's it's been nice to see it where people can become more visible in the hope that other people will be inspired by it.
Mm. I'm saddened though to see, when you compare it with Pride Month, that the lack of visibility. I just don't see the same number of corporations changing their logos. And I don't know, I'd like a bit of that pie. I'd like a bit of a feeling that society was going to come together and celebrate us for this 1 month. That maybe that's something to work on.
I got conversation with Audrey who did the previous interview with me, and I don't know how I feel about the commercialization of it because I understand people aren't changing their logos and corporations aren't putting up the disability flag and all that kind of thing. But I mean, corporations probably don't actually care that much about like
Oh, look, totally. I think you're right to be skeptical about performative inclusivity. I think, especially for disabled people, that's really frustrating. But it is still part and parcel, isn't it, of normalizing, accepting. If we could see more organizations being willing to make a public show, I don't know. Again, as with everything, it's complicated. I don't like the commercialization. I don't like performative inclusivity. But the fact that some businesses feel compelled, say, to recognize Pride Month, I think it's really interesting. It shows a real shift, doesn't it, in how society is treating gay people. I mean, I'd like to see that for disabled people as well, but I appreciate the communities are very different, and well, just the fact that disabled people cover such a huge range of differences, that probably is our biggest barrier, isn't it, to coming together under one banner.
Yeah, no, I agree. Moving sideways a little bit. You've had a great career as a barrister and you practice in family law, mainly children law. I did family law at university in my LB. I did quite well, but to be honest, I wasn't really good at the children bit.
Mm.
I was good at the matrimonial and the divorce law and all that aspects of family law, but the children law kind of got away from me a little bit. Thankfully, I was able to opt out of answering the children law questions on the exam.
Probably wise.
That was well for me. But what does your job as a barrister involve?
Well, probably very little law, and I think that's why some branches of the profession look down on children law barristers. I think the pejorative nickname that we are given is the Care Bears, which is actually quite nice, really, because we are supposed to care, but of course it's not an area of law that attracts the sort of high-flying chancery bar cutting edge intellect, because I deal really with very little law. I'm at the interface of state coercion and vulnerable people. So I think it's very interesting. And the law that we have has to be understood and applied correctly. Otherwise, enormous misery and injustice can occur. So I think it's not an area of law that you will be able to grapple with and enjoy unless you are really interested in people, and bizarrely, unless you've got quite a thick skin. Because if you are very sensitive to the pain and suffering of others, then this will drain you very, very quickly. So you have to tread that really fine line between still being able to care and be compassionate, but also having some inner steel where you are not going to be too empathetic and take on your client's pain. Because of course you're not then an effective lawyer. I don't think there's got to be, hasn't there, that boundary. I'm not people's friend or counselor or therapist, and I've sometimes got to tell them hard things. So yeah, I do. It's not. I think it's probably an area of law you should come into later, when you've got a bit of life experience. When I look back, thinking, the kind of things I was grappling with in my early 20s, it's horrific. I wasn't ready. I wasn't mature enough. I think I am now, 30 years later, but not then. So you may have dodged a bullet if you were dodging children law.
Maybe. Well, I get a mini people at Coram sandwich around
Oh, I was there. And when did you do the mini pupillage?
about 2015, I think it was.
Oh, I left Coram in 2010 and came to Bristol. Oh, so I just missed you by 5 years. Just missed you.
And it was quite evident how engaged you actually with your people skills and how you have to separate yourself from the situation. Because even in the space of a week, I, I was probably struggling about it 3 families in a very difficult situation, and you have to separate yourself from because fundamentally your job is to help them make the most of the situation and or get out of the situation and I did enjoy it, but I get it's a heavy emotional toll.
It's not for everybody, definitely not. And I think it's very wise to know what suits you. And that's always what I say to young barristers starting out. If you can find an area that's a good fit for you, you will love your work. if you can't, it's going to be a grind and a strain. And so it's really important. But I think you kind of know, don't you? You know if you're more a people or an institutions type lawyer. Do you love grappling with the small print of a statutory instrument? No, I don't. Yeah, so it's not actually that hard, I think, to figure yourself out. But I do think the people skills you learn are tremendous and hopefully really transferable into other areas of life.
Absolutely. Every career has ups and downs. What would you say the best experiences of your life, of your career, of
the
your
one
career?
the one I remember too, and I'll probably remember them till I die. I mean, not particularly high flying, but I was just starting out, and I remember a judge saying to me, "I almost was persuaded by your advocacy, Ms. Phillimore." But I was so proud and pleased with that because he sounded really surprised. So I'd obviously done quite a good job. And my second favourite memory was I'd done a pro bono case, which was going to the Court of Appeal on child abduction. And I think it had only got to the Court of Appeal because my client was the litigant in person. They felt sorry for her. It was a case with no merit at all. So I was absolutely terrified. It was my first time in the Court of Appeal. I didn't even realise I had to wear a wig and a gown. So you can imagine I turned up slightly flustered. And then I went to a zone beyond fear. And I thought, I'm just going to enjoy myself. Goodness knows when I'll be in the Court of Appeal again. And one of them fixed me with a stern glare and said, "And what would the view of the Portuguese police be of this, Miss Phillimore?" And I said, "I will confess, my lord, to be utterly ignorant as to the views of the Portuguese police." And I made them all laugh. And it was such a good feeling. I'd gone beyond fear. I mean, you could see how, as you know, I was fairly new to the game. I only just rocked up in my wig and gown. My opponent was sort of saying hello to all the ushers by name. Obviously, he was in the Court of Appeal every day. But it was quite miraculous. I came through it, and I actually really enjoyed it. Of course, we lost, but both those examples are good examples of the art of advocacy, I think, because I met a judge at some drinks do a while back, and he may have had one too many Pim's sundowners. And he was saying to me and the other female barrister, because we've all been in a case together, he's going, "You do realise that nothing you say really ever does make a difference in the end." You know, I'd say in about 1% of cases, the advocate can make a difference. And we both looked really sad. And he said, "But what you do is you make the experience bearable for the client. You get them through it and you make sure it's done properly." So we both cheered up a bit after that. And I think he's right. Sadly, most family cases are sadly inevitable. But that doesn't mean that we just throw people to the wolves and we don't give them legal representation. And we say, because there will be that 1% of cases where we do actually turn the ship around. And I suppose those are the cases that keep us going.
It must feel extremely rewarding when you do win a case like that and you do achieve an unexpected outcome. Have you ever been in such a case?
I'm struggling to think, so the answer must be no. I think most family lawyers have to take the words of Rudyard Kipling to heart. We must treat triumph and disaster in the same way, because our triumphs are... Actually, I'll tell you a very sad story. This is probably my biggest triumph as a family lawyer, but it also was an absolute disaster. I was on the train going down to court, and I decided, I haven't actually finished looking at the F section where they just stick a whole load of random documents. I'd better just finish reading that. And I discovered in that section the smoking gun that showed that the local authority had not carried out an assessment of my client fairly. So in cross-examination, I whipped out this document, asked the killer question, tumbleweed, and the local authority barrister said, "Could we have 20 minutes to adjourn, please?" And the local authority conceded the case, and my clients got their children back. So, whoa, triumph, you might think. Well done, Sarah, for finding that document. 6 months later, my clerk called me up and said, "You know that case you did 6 months ago and the children went back? Well, they've gone back into care on another emergency protection order. Are you free?" So all I had done was delay the inevitable for those children. And that, you can imagine, I had very mixed feelings. I mean, I pulled a blinder. It was one of those perfect moments as an advocate where you ask a killer question, there is no response, and the tumbleweed. And that one question has just changed the shape of the case. But it involved 3 very vulnerable children who then went back into a situation where they weren't safe. So I'd done my duty by my client and the rule of law, but I hadn't helped those children. So that's a very bittersweet memory for me. That was probably my biggest triumph as an advocate, but one of my biggest failures as a child protection lawyer. But those are the breaks, aren't they? These are the things we have to grapple with. And, especially, I suppose, for criminal lawyers, even more so. You're not necessarily defending the individual scumbag in front of you. You're defending a whole system that is absolutely necessary, because we would all want that defense if we were accused of something. So it's difficult, isn't it? I'm saying that's my answer to everything, really. It's very complicated and difficult. It all is. But I guess life is, everything is.
Life is complicated. And the experience you went through kind of makes me think about what the general public say about barristers. Yeah, people who don't really understand the profession often ask me, well, how do you represent people who are bad or whatever? And I mean, obviously, we understand that everybody deserves a fair trial. Everybody ought to have a competent advocate.
Yeah.
But it does raise a question that in that situation, if you are very good at what you do and you do win the case, yeah, it, it's not always straight when it's more complicated.
Well, it's where the rubber hits the road, isn't it? And I think of that a lot in the current debates about freedom of speech and whether we're allowed to offend people or have views that people find upsetting. And it's the same dilemma, isn't it? If we don't give the scumbags the best defense, what happens when we're in their shoes? But it is very difficult to explain that to people outside the system, because there will be guilty people who go free and innocent people who get convicted. No system is infallible. And I think it's interesting you say that the public perception of what barristers do, I think, is very skewed. There's a lack of understanding, isn't there? We're sort of told that we're money grabbing liars on one hand, or completely naive and defending these awful people on the other. And again, I think the public are just they're not clear on the distinction between barristers funded by legal aid and barristers who aren't funded by legal aid. Because obviously 90% of my income is legal aid. And luckily I do mostly care work. So obviously if I did private law or ancillary relief, then I guess I wouldn't be practicing anymore, as they removed legal aid from those cases. So it's interesting, isn't it? It's not just about disability visibility, it's about barrister visibility, isn't it? We've got a double whammy, haven't we, here? A sort of a lack of appreciation from wider society about what it means to be us.
Yeah, and it's something that we're all extremely wealthy, which
Yeah. I mean, obviously I get a perfectly decent salary for the job I do, and I'm very lucky. But when I think of the junior criminal bar, my heart breaks for them. I mean, back in 97, I was at a crossroads. I either went to the family bar or the criminal bar. And I knew then that I wasn't going to hack it at the criminal bar, because the fees were just too low, the work was just too hard. And I don't think anything's really changed since 1997.
yeah, I mean, I can't go back to 1997, but
Yeah,
even
rub it in, youngster. Yes, I can see you're quite fresh faced. Sorry, I forget I'm talking to a child. Ageism, yes.
but even through my legal education, every time I met a barrister, any criminal barrister, they always advise the students to not going to criminal.
Yes.
I don't think I've only met one person who said it's a viable career. And that kind of stuck with me. I mean, a criminal bar, I wouldn't work for me. I think the courts are even more inaccessible. Um, Getting
Mm-mm-mm.
into the guts wouldn't
Yeah.
wouldn't be suitable. But I do have a lot of solidarity with the criminal bar. I have friends at the criminal bar, and it's a tough career to navigate in the areas, and it must be the same in legal aid family law as well.
I think conditions are a lot better for us. I mean, I still remember as a junior barrister going and doing a bail app, which you get paid notoriously little money, and you have to buy your client a pack of cigarettes as well, or at least you did back in the day. And I just thought, this isn't sustainable. You know, I cannot afford to travel to court. I'm going to make £10 today. I've got to pay my rent, buy my food. So I just don't see how. Hats off to anyone at the criminal bar. I think that's so sad that you're told not to go to the criminal bar. But I think it's even sadder that accessibility, would limit you. But yeah, I mean, some of the courts are just appalling. I mean, the lift has been out of order in 3 courts I visit frequently for about 4 months. Luckily, I can manage stairs, but if I couldn't, I'd be buggered. And that's not right, is it?
Yeah, it's not. We've spoken, we just spoken about some of the obstacles in the profession. Well,
Mm.
what have been the biggest obstacles in your career?
I suppose I'm quite lucky in a way that my disability is manageable because I can walk around and I can get upstairs. So I'm not sure if I'd say that would be an obstacle, but maybe it will become to be more so the older I get. I mean, maybe I was just young and full of energy, but the physical environment that we have to navigate as disabled people in courts is shocking because so many of the court buildings are just not fit for purpose. And even Bristol Civil Justice Centre, for example, a brand new court building, they deliberately only put one disabled parking space outside. I'm like, why? There are over 20 courts in that building, and parking is notoriously difficult and expensive in Bristol. And there's this sort of general, very noble thing to get everyone out of their cars, isn't there? But some of us do need that additional thought and assistance. So I would go with physical environment. Actually, I don't think I've ever faced prejudice or discrimination for being disabled, or none that I've been aware of. I mean, I don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but I've certainly never felt that I was ever treated less favorably or looked down upon for being disabled.
I think it's because a lot of many physical barriers that people might not think will occur in the justice system. I think about 80% of courts are inaccessible.
What, 80%? Bloody
Uh,
hell, I didn't know it was that bad.
it's quite high.
Right.
It might be 75, 80.
Oh,
It's
well, the mystery of why I see no disabled barristers is a mystery no more then.
there
That's
you
court.
go. Chambers are often in inaccessible buildings as well.
I had
Oh,
no idea it was that bad. No idea. 80%. That is a
that's
shocking
one figure
stain.
going
That is awful. I'm shocked I didn't know that.
yeah.
Oh, well, so, I better be able to keep on walking then. The moment I lose my mobility, it's bye-bye career then. That is shocking,
Well,
shocking.
I hope not because I hope to be able to make a career working a wheelchair so every will be
Yeah, well, as long as
aware.
you can identify the 20% of courts you can get to. Oh, I mean, it just makes me sad, doesn't it? So that hasn't changed then since I started. In 30 years, we've not seen any significant change. it does make me wonder how real this commitment is for inclusion, diversity, and welcoming disabled people if we can't even sort the basics out.
Yes, exactly. Um, it makes a poor viewing for people who want to enter a profession, I think.
Yeah, why would you put yourself through that? I mean, I have found it difficult to travel around sometimes, but not impossible. If the lift is out, it's a pain, and I get up the stairs very slowly, but I get up the stairs. Oh dear, that's quite a depressing way to end the interview, isn't it? I feel a bit deflated now. I didn't realise it was so bad.
I had an interview with Dr. Daniel Taylor, who's aspiring to be a barrister, and he said not being able to access buildings in the same way as your colleagues is probably the most isolating.
Mm,
I,
mm.
it's hard to disagree with him.
Oh God, absolutely. I'm just thinking when I worked briefly at a university, I was called into the health centre. I was like, okay. And they wanted to assess me as a fire risk because they didn't think I could get down the stairs if there was a fire. And it was just horrible. The way they did it was quite dehumanizing. I mean, that was back in 1997, obviously, back in the midst of time. You won't remember that. And I kind of hope things will be different now, but it doesn't sound like it, not much.
I
I
mean,
know.
I can remember in 97, I was in my bedroom watching Pokemon. Um,
Oh, yeah, rub it in.
not
To me,
quite.
1997 is only yesterday, Rebecca. It's just like, is it really 2020? No.
Well, I feel like I'm getting old. I see people who are now 18 and were born before the millennium, which makes me feel really old.
Oh, I know, it's awful, isn't it, when you start realizing that? Yeah, it comes to us all, I guess. Yeah, that it makes me sad actually that ageism seems to be one of the most prevalent discriminatory attitudes, and yet it comes to us all, doesn't it? And some people seem to think they're immune from the passing of time.
What would you like people to take away from you, Jenny?
It's difficult in a way because a lot of this is so individual to me and my own particular experiences. But the general point, the old cliche, but it's true, is don't give up. Try, strive. This is a fantastic profession for those who are temperamentally suited to it. And I do think it's mental strength and agility which counts for more than physical agility. And I really enjoy being my own boss, not being tied to a desk, having the freedom. Although you have to work hard, you can choose often how you structure your work, although obviously the courts are a bit less structured. I'd say, yeah, just don't give up. My parents never encouraged me really to think of myself as disabled, and that kind of irritated me at sometimes because sometimes I really did need extra help. But on the whole, that served me quite well. My mindset has not been, I am disabled, but just, I'm going to do this. And then you figure it out as you go. And most people are incredibly helpful. I'm just very sad to have not seen much of a change in the last 30 years. But given what you've just told me about the court buildings, that's not a surprise.
I'm really happy that we do begin to see a change going forward with all of which we're both members.
Oh, well, there was nothing like this when I started out. The internet had barely been invented. So hopefully this can do something positive. This is new. What I'm doing now is new. So hopefully for those coming up behind me, there's going to be a wealth of experience, information, a sense of community, as you say, that isolating feeling, because it is mental strength that you need to really get in gear, I think, to succeed at the bar. It can be isolating for everybody, even the able-bodied, but I think we have additional challenges, as you said.
I don't think it's a coincidence that all the organizations involved at the bar and are disability oriented. or focus on visibility and community. I think that's no coincidence. We're members of OBA, Irony Association of Disabled Lawyers, BJ Bar,
Mm,
also have similar aims around disabled students. And I think that's no coincidence. I think they are two key things that many of us are focusing on. Obviously, we need to make sure people getting adjustments and being accommodated in working practices and all. But I think a fundamental sense of belonging seems to be absent. And that's
mm,
why we're all focused on those elements.
yeah.
But I feel like Morris campaign will put a spotlight on lawyers in different professions, and we're hoping that it will encourage people to carry on pursuing a legal career or begin pursuing a legal career because when I was getting my LLB, and I know it was the same for you, I couldn't see any disabled baristas.
Mm.
I mean, I know they were around, but it wasn't that visibility that I feel we're getting now. And I'm hoping that will spill on the next generation of advocates and lawyers to get involved.
Well, I think what you're doing is fantastic. I didn't have anything like this when I was starting out, and it's interesting to see to think what difference, what positive difference it could have made. So all of this is really excellent stuff.
Thank you. Um, I don't, there's a lot going on in the world at the moment around disability rights and the welfare system and support available. What do you think the key areas are, uh, the key problems in disability rights at the moment?
Well, I just had a horrific tweet on my timeline today, which was talking about investigations of suicides from people who'd been assessed and presumably had failed their assessments. And I just did a horrible case about somebody not qualifying for continuing healthcare funding. They were suddenly told they didn't have a primary health need when they'd had one for 20 years. And it's coming down to resources, isn't it? And the fact that we need reasonable adjustments to be able to participate in society, and that costs money. And I do worry with the rising cost of living that we are going to be the ones to suffer the most because we need more than just performative inclusivity. We need actual hands in pockets, and that really did upset me because of course I'm one of the few disabled people who has a job. You know, we are very underrepresented, aren't we, in employment. We're more likely to be living in poverty, not working. So I'd kind of just taken my eye off that ball.
It's difficult because our impairments or conditions or disabilities are obviously something we have to deal with. And then there's so much in the society that prevents us from getting jobs and having a better income. And I find that is staggering. And on top of that, in the last 10 years, 15 years, there's been, well, we had a crash and then we had a period of austerity and had an impact on the welfare state, on the social security system. And with the introduction of PIP, doesn't seem to be working properly. It seems it's an immense threat to the important disabled people. And my own research on this is it's over 100,000 disabled people have died in the last 10 years because of a lack of resourcing and financial support and support in general. And that's heartbreaking.
All that potential, that's the saddest thing, all the potential that is lost. That really is that's why I think we've just got to keep pushing and shining a light and hoping to persuade other people to come and follow us. But of course, they can't if they don't have the equipment they need, the access to the buildings they need. It's infrastructure problems, isn't it? There's so much potential and will, and there's so much support and good feeling. But yeah, I think you've identified that's the brick wall against we're going to keep coming up against it.
But with a increasingly growing community, we can come together and argue for change, which we both do, and more people are beginning to see the problems
Yeah, yeah,
around. And with a greater sense of solidarity and potential to achieve significant change is there. We just have to be persistent and
yeah,
consistent in advocating for it.
yeah, definitely. Well, that is a positive note, a more positive note to end it on than my
It
despair.
is.
Yeah.
And what I was happy for. Thank you, Sarah. It's been fantastic to speak with you. And
Oh, thank
thank
you.
you for taking part in this Sober Warrior and Fun.
Oh, well, thank you very much for what you're doing. And I hope that in 10 years' time, it's a very different conversation, or
I
even
hope so.
5 years. Thanks very much. We'll have a super weekend and don't go out in the sun. That's what
Uh, I
I'm gonna be under
can't,
the tree all weekend.
I can't make any promises to
Just
everybody else. Thank you for watching another episode of Disabled Warrior and Fun. It is very hard at the moment, so do stay hydrated and look after yourself. Take care.